Hello and welcome to AiArthritis Voices 360. This is the official talk show for the International Foundation for Autoimmune and Autoinflammatory Arthritis, or AiArthritis for short. And my name is Tiffany Westrich-Robertson. I'm the CEO of the organization and also a person living with AiArthritis diseases, primarily non-radiographic axial spondyloarthritis. Whew, I ran out of breath a little bit. Saying that, but I am here, but I am not alone. This is a very, very, very special edition of our talk show. I am proud to say that I am sitting here with four lovely people, and they're going to introduce themselves right now. So first, I'm going to have the two regular repeating co-hosts, patient co-hosts that we've had on the show before. You know them, you love them. Let's start with Miss Deb.
Hey everybody, I am Deb Constein. I am in the Madison, Wisconsin area. I was diagnosed with RA at the young age of 13, and I am happy to be back.
We're happy you're back too. All right, now let's go over to Miss Patrice.
Hi everyone, welcome to EULAR 2021. My name is Patrice Johnson. I live in Northern California. And I was diagnosed with RA 10 years ago, and I'm happy to say this is my second virtual EULAR.
Woo! That's right. And for those of you who are listening to this as the podcast audio version that airs, there is another uncut version that will be on YouTube of all of us on video. So you can see that Patrice has the Eiffel Tower in the back because it was supposed to be in Paris. So that's why. All right. But we're only halfway there. We've got two more. So I'm going to welcome for the first time to the show somebody who has started at our organization, employed, and we love her, Miss Katie. Hi, Katie.
Hey, I'm so happy to be here. So excited to be attending my first EULAR. Wish I was in Paris, but I also have a lovely Paris-esque background. And I was also diagnosed with RA about 19 years ago. But today I am coming to you from Metro Detroit, Michigan. So
wonderful.
Happy to be here.
Awesome. And last but certainly not least, we have Leslie. Hey, Leslie.
Hi, everyone. I'm Leslie Rott Welsbacher. I am also coming to you from the Metro Detroit area. I was diagnosed with lupus and RA in 2008 at the age of 22. And I have been blogging about living with chronic illness since a week after I was diagnosed.
Wonderful. And I had the opportunity to meet you at the American College of Rheumatology Scientific Convention. I don't know, I can't pinpoint the year. It was either 15 or 16, I think. But I've been a fan of following you for quite a while. So this is the first time that we've had you on the show as well. We're excited to have you. But it's not just about the show. Patrice sort of gave you a little insider scoop on what it's about. We are at EULAR 2021. Woo! Tuning in from our computers and our in our homes. So what is EULAR Congress anyway? You might be asking. Well, first of all, there's a name change. So when we've introduced this in the past, we've said EULAR. We've said a different acronym, but they are all about bringing their mission and the work that they do forward into an alliance, a collaboration. And with that, they wanted to change their acronym. So now when we say EULAR, we're talking about the European Alliance of Associations for Rheumatology. I actually had to look at my piece of paper because I'm so used to saying the other acronym. I didn't want to mess that one up.
It's hard to break that one.
It is. It's like, Deb, if you told me to start calling you Julie, like, what?
It wouldn't happen.
But you know, it's just,
yeah.
You're used to something, you're used to something. But this is, Patrice was with us last year and we're happy to have her back. And Deb and I have been attending this for this is our fourth, I believe.
Yes, because there's been the second virtual, because I was like, wait, it's 3, but yeah, I'm not forgetting last year.
Right. And so one of the things that I wanted to preface by this is we invited Leslie, and then we got to give a shout out to Eileen Davidson. You might know her as Chronic Eileen. Shout out. She is also on our Go to EULAR team. 2021. She wasn't able to be on the debrief today, but she will be in future debriefs that you will see on our YouTube channel. And this is the second year we've done this Go to EULAR, and Patrice was the one who we brought with us last year. We've expanded the team in 2021, and this is a program, a pilot program in its last phase that we're doing as the mission of our organization to help all patients have a voice. And it's not fair that just we get to be at the table. We want all voices to be at the table. And so we offered passes and to come along with us so that we can give more people living with our diseases opportunities to experience the conference and really get a behind the scenes action of how we navigate the conference and be there for questions and learning experiences like this. So we're, again, just super, super thrilled to have everybody coming with us. And if you are interested, we'll give you some information about how you can get involved with that at the end of the show. So let's get rolling here. We've been at, how long have we been here? It seems like a week, but how long?
Day and a half. We did have pre-work, so we probably started last week. So,
well, that's true. That's true. And then we did have a little bit of issue getting actually in to, so that's for a whole other story. But yeah. I was able to get most of the others in. I took the last role getting in there. But finally so I've been in probably about 24 hours, but seen a lot since then. I was going to ask some of you, there are different themes that we've seen emerging. And I thought, if anyone wants to jump in and give us some examples of that. I know maybe Leslie, did you want to tell us a couple of themes that you've noticed?
Well, definitely collaboration. And that's something that, I was kind of warned ahead of time that would be a thing. And it definitely is just from the little bit that I've seen so far. And I think that's really awesome. And it's definitely unique. So I like that. And I'll be watching for it as the conference goes on.
Absolutely. And just to piggyback on that, one of the things that's really cool about EULAR, and not saying that the American College of Rheumatology, love ya, not saying anything.
Equal.
Don't keep us out, don't blackball us. But it's not, that conference, that scientific congress is not as patient friendly as the EULAR ones. And in particular, EULAR has a full pillar. They have 3 pillars, and one is for the researchers, one's for the health professionals, the rheumatologists, and then you've got the patient. It's an actual third equal pillar. And I even noticed in the plenary, which is the opening, what we're going to talk about here next after these main themes, is there was a part where they were talking about this collaboration and these alliances that are most important to them. And they gave the floor to one of each stakeholder group. And the president started by saying, well, we're going to turn over the floor to the most important person here at the table. And he gave it to the patient. And that was Elsa. We know Elsa too. Hey, Elsa. So shout out to Elsa.
So many friends.
From EULAR Paris. But that was just, so that it's really obvious as a person who goes to these different conferences that you can tell just there is a welcoming, and we really appreciate that. So what else? Who wants to throw out another one of these emerging themes?
Well, I think inflammation is a big one, and inflammation can be stretched out in so many ways. There are 2 sessions that I saw on RA with dementia. And obviously, as you brought up yesterday, Tiff, was that the endpoint of, inflammation is that's the whole piece that goes right along with that. So.
Right. And something that our organization, like many nonprofits, we have a committee that has different stakeholder groups. We meet at the end of the year, a couple of times during the year, and just to make sure we're all, learning what's important to the other stakeholder groups. And in the 2020 end of the year, one of our pharmaceutical collaborators mentioned that they are starting to focus on inflammation as the umbrella which was very in keeping with what we were seeing emerge here. Before, I think in these meetings, we definitely talk about inflammation, but it's more of a symptom or a piece of a disease. But this time it was led with inflammation, and then how the inflammation impacts different diseases and comorbidities and multi-morbidities, which we'll get into on what that means here in a minute. But all of these other, it leads to so many other things, organ involvement, and all the way to depression, fatigue, etc. Those are the main ones. Did I miss any?
Sure, I'll think of one tomorrow. Sorry.
There was an emerging theme last year as well, that they keep talking about your environment while you have these diseases. And last year, I can't remember how many videos we watched. They said about the smoking and how when you have these diseases, it just makes things even worse. And also your diet, which is salt and sugar and oh yeah, they went really big on the sodas. I gave up sodas a long time ago. Yeah. So I think that's really great. And I think there's a session, I don't think it's today, I think it's either tomorrow or on Saturday, about you are what you eat. And so I can't wait to see that one.
Yeah, for sure. And Deb, by the way, is a licensed dietitian. So this is very much in her wheelhouse, and we'll be excited to hear some in-depth reporting back too from Deb on that. And you made me think of another one that we'll hear a little bit more from Leslie and Deb here in a few minutes on remission. That came up for the first time in EULAR 2020. And we did a lot. We did these video debriefs. We have probably 10 or 12. So they're on our YouTube channel. We'll make sure everybody has links to them. But that one was a really good episode, the debrief, because it was the first time we heard about, remission. And I was quoted of going, what? Because I literally couldn't believe that we were there. I mean, we as people living with diseases, I never thought I could be off of a treatment. Now, can I don't know. We can get into the more of the logistics, but I know, Leslie, you sent a text, our group text, just that you saw that and kind of had the same reaction, right?
Yeah, I was pretty mind blown, because I think as patients, we know about it and we think about it. And I think doctors kind of less so. So I was really impressed to hear that.
Yeah. So that was that. I have to say, and we said it last time, that was the first of these research conferences, and we've been going to ACR for almost a decade. And so to really see that was just amazing to us, that's the direction that research is going. Really looking forward to hearing more about that as we progress in this conference and the future conferences. So let's jump into the reviews of, not really reviews, overviews. We're not sitting here going like, I give that a 10 out of 10 or whatever. It's just, we're giving a debrief, a summary. So that was a poor choice of words. But the first one was called Help. What do I need to cope with my RMD, or rheumatic disease? And I know Patrice and I attended that and wrote some notes, and some of the others here were part of that. Excuse me. As far as, did not attend it, but can still be part of it, because as we like to do in these debriefs, it's not just about disseminating or filtering information and facts back to you. It's how is it relevant to us? Why do you care that we're learning this information? And since everybody in this conversation at the table has the diseases, it's okay. We can't all be at everything, but it's just like you all listening couldn't be there, but we're trying to bring that to you. And then let's talk about how it's relevant. So I'm actually going to, I've got to pull up my presentation here. Patrice, did you want to start off by just giving kind of an intro? And we're only going to talk about two. There were 4 total, but we're going to talk about the first one, and we're going to talk about the one with the exercise. So if you just want to give a quick overview while I pull this up.
Well, the first one session was titled, What My Newly Diagnosed Patient Should Know About Disease, Its Risk Factors. And this gentleman, I cannot pronounce his last name, but we'll call him Zoltan. That was his first name.
That'll work.
So he was saying that they are now looking at some new aims. Of course, I'm not sure what he means by aims in RMD, such as cure, prevention.
Oh, I do, but go ahead. I'll fill that in.
Okay, remission, as we just mentioned, and then function, workability, quality of life, and then eventually predictions and outcomes. And then he went into several phases of arthritis, and that was just, he really expanded on that. So for time, I will just, about pre-arthritis, 5 to 10 years before, and then during your whole journey. So it was just very, very interesting. And then he went into genetics and then environment, like I was talking before.
Mhm.
And also just a real quick fun fact. I did not know Renoir, the great painter, had, well, they didn't call it rheumatoid arthritis back then, they called it arthritis, but just a fun factor.
Yeah, that is. So I'll kind of build from that. So thanks for that wonderful introduction, Patrice. And I wanted to point out a few of the words that you said, and the aims in the treatment are like the targets. So that's where research is starting to focus on. And it goes back to what we just said about remission, because this is a good kind of tie-in, because 10 years ago, the whole focus was on treat to target. And prior to about a decade plus, there was a pyramid model of treatment. And it started with diet and exercise. And you try all of these things before you do treatment. And then there was this aha moment where everybody said, you know what, let's flip that and let's start treating to target with getting patients connected to treatments early. Well, the result of the treat to target research is what we're seeing in remission. That's why we can test remission, because they're testing the patients that we're treat to target and finding that indeed it works. Those are the people that are experiencing remission. So there's a whole episode on that. Again, I'll link you all to on YouTube that we talk in more depth about it, but it leads to this. So the new aims that they're talking about, and let's preface, the topic of this is she mentioned, is what do you teach patients, you meaning doctors, who have these early diseases? What do they need to know about? What things do they need to know about? So I made a little side note, like, I love my roomie, Al. Hey, Al, because Dr. Al Kim, or Dr. Kim, Dr. Al Kim, or just Al. If you've listened to the show, it's one of the other. I actually have an appointment with good old Al on Monday. But one of the things that I love him, but I don't think we've ever talked about some of this stuff. So I don't think the onus is really on the doctor, I guess is what I'm saying, to necessarily do this. But cure, prevention, remission, prediction. Those are pretty powerful words. And those are not things that I even think. I don't know. What about you all? Katie, we haven't heard from you in a while. Turn your microphone on.
I was just thinking, I've had a few people who don't have any of these diseases, but they'll ask about like prevention. Like, is there any way I can get screened or get tested? And I haven't been aware of pretty much anything in the past. I know, there's the genetic factor, environmental factors, but I haven't been aware of anything like blood testing. And I think I caught a bit of that where the doctor said something as far as markers in your blood. And I'm like, oh, you can actually maybe prevent or get ahead of it even before you have any kind of signs or symptoms. So I thought that was very sort of hopeful and I want to see where that goes.
Well, that's a great answer, because we didn't even plan that, but that's exactly what I was going to talk about next. So as Patrice mentioned, they really talked a lot about this genetic plus environmental. And that really, I just want to also preface this, our organization covers autoimmune and autoinflammatory diseases. Those are different diseases. Those are different parts of the immune system. One is innate, born with it. It's highly dependent on different, sometimes genetic mutations. But it's both sides of the immune system. And then autoimmune is the other side. That's the adaptive. And again, we could link to more information. We have a whole podcast on that as well. And the difference is that autoimmune needs to have the environmental trigger. The autoinflammatory can, but it's often unknown why it triggers. So in saying that, this was a really interesting one for, for autoimmune diseases in particular. So I wanted to preface that also, since we cover Still's disease and some other diseases that are autoinflammatory, but do have autoimmune property as well. So they talked about basically you can't do anything about your genetics. It is what it is, but you can do something about environment. And that's where they sort of cross this information between prevention and maintaining or helping to manage your disease. And again, just going to mention, we can go into more information. You can also email us or message us about, oh, I want to learn more about that. Let us know. This is just a debrief. So just giving you an overview. We'll cover more at another time. But essentially, we know that genetics play a role, and a lot of it's called the HLA gene has been shown in a lot of the research. They look in those biomarkers, they look at the blood, and that kind of falls into this whole precision medicine and understanding how treatments can be developed based on targeting those genetics. But if we know now that, what were some of them? You said smoking, soda, or really high sugar, salt. What were the other ones?
Oh, you said gum disease.
Oh, yes. Gum disease.
Take care of your teeth.
Gingivitis. So there is a definite proven research link between mouth decay and an onset. The big one, gut bacteria. So these are things that we know, and they didn't have lung bacteria. Oh no, that's the same as smoking. That's where smoking comes in. Sorry about that. But those are the things now they know are risk factors. So what that tells us, Katie, when you're thinking of prevention, too late for us. And of course, you can't say you would necessarily prevent this. It's too early to say that. But what they're saying is, we know, for example, smoking is a huge trigger, and not only trigger, but we've seen research in most of these conventions we've been at that shows that outcomes are worse in people who smoke. Outcomes are worse in people who have are using these certain environmental triggers. And so when we look at this, knowing that if I had a child and they were genetically predisposed to these diseases, then it would be even more important to be like, please don't smoke, please don't smoke, please don't smoke, or to help with a healthier diet or things of that nature. What do you all think about that? Any thoughts?
I'll speak up.
I think,
Go ahead, Katie.
I was going to say secondhand smoke too. Sometimes you can't prevent that. If someone's smoking around you. And I think, I want to say they call it passive smoke. And I think I've heard at one point the term third hand smoke or something, where the residue even gets on places. My mind goes to that as far as, there's only so much you can control about your own environment.
Yeah, that's true. It's a good point.
It's a really good point. And actually, I remember sitting in the car when my parents would smoke, and the film on the car windows and things like that. I mean, back in the day, it's all around you. But, speaking to the diet, I think there's so many people that are wrapping their arms around the diet, because that's something you definitely have control over.
Mm-hmm.
And it is, again, you don't have necessarily 100% control over your microbiome, which is your gut and your gut bacteria. But once you kind of figure out a little bit about it, there are things you can do for it.
Right.
Absolutely. So I think that is something that folks are embracing much more, and people want to know more about it. And there's so much research happening out there on the microbiome and all the different bugs in your gut.
Right. Right. And so now they're saying, hey, if you know, and if we can start identifying more genes, and we know the genes that typically trigger disease, plus, family history, or so now we're getting somewhere, and that's that's really exciting. It's not kind of exciting, it's
I
really
love that.
exciting. And then you tie in the remission, and it's like mind blown. The other, I'll just quickly mention a couple of the others. Preventative, specifically, breastfeeding. Thought that was interesting. We'll have to reach out to our our friend Mariah Leach at Mama's Facing Forward, and ask her about a little bit more information about that. The Mediterranean diet they use specifically.
Yes.
I was a big fan. They put up a big picture of red wine, and they also said beer. So, okay. Some studies saying that they could have anti-inflammatory effects. Vitamin D. I think many of us have heard of vitamin D deficiency being a factor. And then they mentioned comorbidity. So you're just going to hear this over and over, I think, in our debrief today, because it's the thing. It is really everywhere, that inflammation as an umbrella. And I do want to take this opportunity to say the difference. So it was in this actual presentation that the gentleman gave us the definition of, and there was a slide associated, and said that comorbidity is when the disease is in the center. So it is thought that the disease triggered something else. So that would be comorbidity. But multimorbidity is when it's the patient centered. So it could be stemming from something else attributed to the patient. And they talked about like depression being one of those, for example. So it's kind of a differentiating the cause and effect. Saying that maybe it's coming from the center of the patient. So that I've seen that word come up many times too.
Hey, Tiff, do you think that they're talking about with multimorbidity, because we believe that a surgery caused the trigger of my rheumatoid arthritis. Do you think that is talking about the same thing, or am I misconstruing that?
Well, let's pull up the slide. Well, you all can't see the slide, unfortunately, but I'm going to look at the slide. So on the slide, it doesn't go into that many of the environmental, but it does have the patient in the middle, and it talks about being able to have, like if you had rheumatoid arthritis, for example, that could lead to cardiovascular disease, but you also as a patient could have cardiovascular disease on your own. It may not be because you have RA. So I believe that, I don't know that would be a multimorbidity as much as a causation or cause and effect.
Correct. Okay.
Right.
That's how I'm interpreting that. Because again, the whole cardiovascular thing
that's a big theme too. That started last year. We started seeing a lot of that as well. But no, that it was interesting. And like I said, they talked a lot about the comorbidities, and that inflammation, and that patients and their early disease should understand all of the different things that can happen. Again, I'm gonna be honest, I love you, Al, but I didn't know that. But then again, he was to his defense, he only got me a few years ago. So I don't know, did any of your doctors talk to you all about this kind of stuff? I'm seeing a lot of head shaking. No,
mine does. Cause she's actually, I'm sorry, Katie, there must be a bit of a delay. I was just going to say that my rheumatologist, again, I've only had her for probably 6 years now out of my whole span, because I've fired a few. But exactly. I think I even saw Leslie shake her head. But she's actually really into research and science. So she does and she also knows my connection to AiArthritis, and she brings things up specifically to me, and knowing my background with science and stuff.
Okay. Katie?
I was just going to say, I think it was the day I was diagnosed, my rheumatologist mentioned uveitis. And I just, I was in middle school. I had no idea, why are you talking about my eyes? Like, what does that have to do with anything? So now I understand it. At the time, it just kind of freaked me out. But that's the only thing I can think of.
Okay. So yeah, it's nice though that they're starting to put things like this at these conferences too, because it was under the sessions to sort of train and teach. So that was interesting. And then that leads us to the second one. We won't spend as much time on this one, but I thought it was interesting. It was good to mention, which is the influence of physical activity on sports and inflammation. How many of you all currently exercise regularly?
Are you going to consider is walking exercise?
Sure. Yeah.
Okay, then yeah.
I'm terrible right now. I did get a gym membership and I've got to get back in that. But I know Katie and I started a gym membership about the same week. So yeah. Well, the statistics here, this was interesting because I wish I could show it. We'll have to get a link or something to it. But the presentation started off with one slide of these people these women jumping really hard, really fit, and they're jumping on these mini trampolines, and it looks like they're really aggressive and getting it. And then the next one is of an older female with a walking cane, and it was like, this is what you get when you Google search, exercise. And this is what you get. The other one was when you research exercise for rheumatic diseases. And I was like, oh, that's not okay. But it's true. And the question they posed was, why? Are patients scared? What do you all think? I know my opinions, but I want to hear you. I mean, what do you think of exercise? Are you worried about doing too much and having it hurt you more? Or what are your thoughts?
Well, I walk 4 to 5 miles every morning, and then 3 times a week I lift weights. They're about 5 pounds to get my upper body, because walking, that's your lower body. I feel better after I have taken my walk. I do, although AiArthritis does not cover osteoarthritis, I do have that as well in about 75% of my body. And so first thing, you get up in the morning and it's hard, just even, getting out of bed and just grabbing my robe out of the closet. But by the time I'm out the door and on my walk, by the time I get back home, I feel better, even when I'm in a lot of pain. So for me, the walking is key in the summertime. I add in swimming because well, I've been a water baby since I've been a toddler, but because there's no weight bearing. So you can't really get hurt with the swimming. And of course, if you're going to be Michael Phelps and train 8 hours a day, yeah. But, just 1 hour a day, or even the aqua aerobics or water aerobics, at least you're moving your body parts. Anyone
No? Okay. So they presented a bunch of studies, and again, I'm just going to highlight a couple, and then I want to go into one in particular a little bit more detail. In Italy, 90% of persons living with rheumatic diseases are inactive, meaning they do less than 2 physical activities per week. And in the US, I couldn't tell because the chart, it wasn't specific. It kind of had a line. It looked like it was around 70%. But I think Finland was the most active. I think it was only like 40% were inactive. But they did studies with these people showing that, lack of exercise, you've got higher inflammation rates, pain, fatigue, all of that is higher. So the question went back to, well, why aren't patients exercising then? If there is research that's showing this. And one of the questions was, well, maybe some of them are afraid with intense exercise, not water, not walking, more intense, high impact, that could, be more, I guess, aggressive on your working out. Would that damage me long term? And it's funny because I had that same issue when I first got diagnosed. I kickboxed, and I never did it ever since then. I was so scared that if I punched too hard, that I'd hurt myself. And this study followed people for, and I'm sorry, I don't have the amount of time that up here. Oh, 2 years. Yes, I do. I'm bad. 136 participants they put on high intensity weight bearing exercises, and they developed, they did not have any more damage in their or progressive disease than the 145 in the control group.
Interesting. That's really
Yeah.
interesting. Tiff, you and I both watched the fatigue thing, and one of the specific focuses on the fatigue part was the lack of motivation
It
to.
all ties in.
It
really-
does, yeah.
It really does. We've talked about this before in passing, just in, whether it's on our show or it's just, we all know each other on these communities. That's how we've connected. And, there's conversations all the time about, oh, I just wish I could. Just like I said, I just joined the gym. I really think that support and cheering each other on and being able to share, like, I went to the gym.
That's huge. You need to be accountable to somebody.
I think I've even done that to Katie. Like, I went and text her. Look, where's where I'm at the gym. It's just because it makes you, you just, and then that one person just going, way to go. I just think we need to do more of that with each other. There's always a lot of talk about treatments, but treatment.
Leslie, you were nodding your head when I said being held accountable. Do you find the same thing?
I do. I mean, I think, the pandemic has kind of changed the way we do things. And, but I used to kickbox and I used to do other things. And I think sometimes it is like a mind over matter thing. Like, is this gonna hurt me? Is this going to make me feel worse? And so I think to have that encouragement, and especially if it is someone else that has a similar illness, I think that it's super helpful.
I agree.
Yeah. This gentleman talked about lack of education and information that is out there for people with these diseases.
Yes.
About exercise. I mean, you can go on Google and say, how do I exercise with my arthritis? And it would bring up thousands of different pages.
Well, and the example in the beginning with the woman walking with a walking stick. I mean,
So how do you know what's a reliable resource?
And unfortunately, sometimes, Deb knows this story, but I really hurt myself. And I think we all have to also somehow be cognizant of what our specific disease is, because I have spondyloarthritis, which is of the spine. And I was so worried about my hurting my hands by going to a batting cage. And I didn't even think about the twisting motion. I was in bed for days, and I had a flare that was the worst flare I had since before medication. And I went to the gym a few weeks ago, and I wanted to lose weight in my stomach. And so what do? I'm doing twists. And it was that. And after that, I was couldn't go to the gym for like a week. And it took me that to realize you got to know what could cause your specific disease to flare as well. So keep in mind that the information is generalized, and you got to think, like, if you do have RA and your hands are greatly affected, I personally would be a little worried about punching.
I would be too.
I'd punch someone if I wouldn't punch anyone. But like, doing a punching bag real hard or something. So, I mean, with a grain of salt impact, but I know now twisting, not going to happen.
What helped me a lot was I had just sort of been at the end of doing physical therapy. And so I went to the gym before my last session, and I was able to ask my physical therapist, like, what should I do? What shouldn't I do? Or especially my wrists don't really work at all. So do I hold things differently, or like barbells, or like the TheraBands? Like, how do I do this in the best way for me? Like, how can I adjust it? So I had kind of like, a little bit of expert help. And, before that, I would have thought maybe a personal trainer, but that would seem like not exactly approachable, because that just seems way out of my league. But physical therapy, they were great working with me and like giving me tips as far as try this, do that, or this maybe isn't necessary for what you're looking for. So
alternative motions and things like that. I like that. Like, I know that yoga, they do alternative or chair yoga and stuff like that. I know one thing in particular for me that I think about is when Thanksgiving is coming up, and I usually host Thanksgiving for lots of people. And I know that I know what chopping all the vegetables, onions and celery and whatnot, and again, lifting lots of things in a short amount of time. I just know that for a couple days I'm gonna be down, or being out in the garden, doing that kind of work. I just know I'm still going to do it, but there is some modification. You can buy store cut up vegetables that are celery and onions. I just have a hard time spending the money, which again is mind over matter. And that's stupid because again, I could be so protected. And I'm also really particular. My mom comes sometimes to help and she'll cut the onion and the celery too big for me. And I'll be going back and reach. It's stupid. It's like, I just got to let go.
Let the celery go, Deb. Do it.
Yes, exactly. Just don't look at it and just throw it in the, in the bowl when it's done.
Oh my goodness. Well, so anyway, that's what we'll leave it on there. There's again, debriefing. We're just kind of giving you the information that's out there, but really how is it relevant for us, people living with these diseases? So we'll expand these conversations. We can do it on social media, get more of your thoughts on there, but let's jump to a session that goes more into the remission. And that's one that I know, Leslie, you and Deb, did. It was treating lupus to target remission or low disease activity. So who wants to start?
I can start. The session that I did, it was raising a question. It was, is remission achievable with today's drugs? And it was really interesting. The overall question was yes, but, which is interesting. It just talked about the recent studies, and there were a lot of slides with studies, and talked about in recent studies, over 50% of patients are able to achieve at least one remission state during their follow-up visits. One other study also talked about for folks that have had lupus for a long time, they're saying that long-term remission is very rare. So I thought that, I'm just kind of hitting some highlights, and they talked about it's called LLDAS, which is Lupus Low Disease Activity Scores. And they were just talking about how to achieve that. And also, the difference between remission on meds and remission off meds. So Leslie, do you want to make any comments related to that specifically?
Yeah, so I think that this is super interesting because you don't hear this. I think as patients that live with the illness, we know. I have come to the acceptance that I am medication dependent, that I may be in remission clinically, but I will never be off medication if I want to stay in remission. And so they said that remission off treatment really isn't even a useful definition because it's so rare. And they said in less than 10% of patients. So, there's an estimate that 1.5 million people in America have lupus. That means that 150,000 would actually ever go into remission and be totally off treatment. And so I think some people might look at that and say, well, why do we even bother trying? But, I think for one of the earlier speakers in that whole set said, quality of life is not very good. And they even compared it to HIV and Huntington's disease, just in terms of the quality of life score. And so I think that we have to be realistic. And I think that patients, sometimes are more realistic than clinicians are. And so for me, I just thought, patients know this, but to actually hear doctors say that the likelihood of lupus patients going into remission and being totally off treatment is not very likely. So Deb, I think you hit on that, yes, but, and I don't think people should be discouraged by that. I think people should say, we're building a more realistic picture of this disease and what living with it looks like.
100%. I agree for sure. And it talked about, in the session I was at, it talked about predictors of non-remission or longer term to remission. And it was basically about disease activity, therapy, their ethnicity, which also plays into it, or pre-existing organ damage, which I found was interesting, that could totally affect, that being able to do that. As far as they also talked about obstacles in achieving stable remission, which is the disease flares despite the therapy, persistent active disease, and inability to reduce the glucocorticoids, which are steroids, prednisone, things like that. And I mean, I have RA, and I'm at 6 milligrams of prednisone, but I don't see it going really much lower than that. My rheumatologist keeps bringing that up and wanting to keep tapering, but I flare so badly every time, even half a milligram. It definitely gave a lot of different information, but it was definitely in a sustained remission. Even with having rheumatoid arthritis, I have never had remission on meds. I've never been off meds since I was 13 years old too, but I agree with you. I don't think I'll ever get there. But again, I don't think it's a reason for folks not to try to achieve it, because everybody is different. Everybody is so individualistic.
Patrice, you wanted to add something.
Yeah, I don't have anything to add. I wanted to ask Leslie a question, and if this is personal, just tell me to butt out. But you have lupus, and this person that was speaking on this session said that the quality of life is poor. I mean, how do you feel about that? I mean, we all live with these diseases. I mean, if we would all choose not to have them, but I feel like I have a pretty good quality of life. So can I ask you how you felt about when that person said that?
I mean, to be honest, when I think of HIV and I think of Huntington's disease, and I think when the general public probably hears that, they probably get a very bleak picture, even though I know that survival rates and living with HIV have greatly improved. I can't say what that was relative to because he didn't say. So I don't know if that means off treatment. I don't know exactly where that was coming from. So I do think that is a little bit extreme potentially. And I don't know if that was kind of just to grab people in, because that was really entertaining.
To reference, maybe just to give a whole different category, possibly.
And I think, maybe if we're talking about with the goal of being in remission and off treatment, because if 10%, is that benchmark, then my quality of life would be horrible if I was off treatment, but then I also probably wouldn't be in remission. So, I think that's a good question. And I do think it is extreme, and relative to what. And I will say one thing that did impress me, one of the speakers near the end did talk about that the majority of their patients are Caucasian, and heavily rely on one specific treatment that isn't really used and may not even have been approved for African Americans, which we know are disproportionately affected. And that person was from Italy, but I did think that they were kind of talking about health equity, and especially where lupus is concerned. We know that there's a lot of issues in terms of who the disease disproportionately affects. So I did think that was interesting, but I would say my quality of life is definitely better than that. And I hope that other patients experience that as well. But I don't know if they're referencing that before getting to remission, then I would say I agree. My quality of life has definitely improved now that my diseases are more stable.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for sharing that. And I think a lot of people can also understand and relate to that. And I just wanted to, I was writing, I do that. I was writing a lot of notes, and there's so many words used with remission, clinical remission, stable remission. Like it was,
Yes.
you mentioned several different, and I mean, that's a discussion all, and a whole other thing of what it means to a patient versus the clinical. And so when we talk about it, it certainly does lead to more questions. I had one, and I'm sorry if I put you all on the spot. I just happened to pull up one slide, and I wanted to ask. So if you don't know or you don't remember, it's totally cool. But it said, is lupus remission an achievable goal in 2021? And then there's a yes. And then it says, in recent studies, over 50% of patients are able to achieve at least one remission state. And that's where my question came in. What does that even mean? Is that clinical? Is that stable? Is that patient interpreted? But I don't know what it means. At least one remission state during their follow-up visits.
So in my opinion, I'm assuming that is clinical because, again, this was a doctor putting this together, and she had many studies that she linked as well. So again, I found it very interesting too, to Leslie's point about, again, doctor's perspective of remission and patients, their thoughts as far as what remission is.
Plus the other information that Leslie was talking about at the beginning said 10%, are likely in their lifetime. So I'm sure it's just a good example of, I don't have enough information to look at that, because I could look at that as a person living with the disease and go, wow, 50% of lupus patients can go into remission.
Yeah.
Woo! And in 2021, wow, but there's something behind that, because it doesn't match the statistic of, 10%. So it goes, you'll hear us when we talk about research. There's baselines. There's who was in that study. Like, are they talking about people who only had the disease for 2 years? Are they talking about people like Leslie who've been living with, like, there's cofactors that are involved that we can't see by looking at a slide. And that's why it worries. That's why I prefer to do these debriefs via video than always just share a snapshot on social media without context. Right.
And actually, several of the slides were talking about different, methods that were used. The LDAS, low disease activity scores, the lupus low disease activity scores. So again, different models that are being used.
Yeah, that's going to come up. That's going to come up in some of our other conversations in our future debriefs as well. I guarantee it. Anything else? Any major points from that weren't covered?
Nothing more than what I said. Again, the one thing that stood out to me was, predictors that would actually take into consideration the disease activity and the type of manifestations, the therapy, ethnicity. Because again, there's nothing you can do about that. Nothing. So, and then the pre-existing organ damage. So those were all things that could kind of stand in the way of it.
And I think for me, just the distinction they made between steroid usage, and they had a very specific benchmark of, if you're in stable disease activity, you will be on, I think they said 7.5 milligrams or less. And once you're above that, you would no longer be considered stable. But they did not provide any benchmark for immunosuppressive or biologic medication. So
interesting. Yeah.
I thought that was really interesting, because I don't know if there will be more to come on that, or if that's just how it's stay, but I found that distinction very interesting.
And I'll just add to that too. When we get these slides, I always try to write down, they'll quote the research, the journal number or what have you, because I always want to go back, because there are more questions. The speaker can only say so much, and I want to look at the inclusion. I want to see, what was the baseline? What did the study sample? How long have they been on treatments? Are they naive to treatments? Or, all of those things matter when you're quoting statistics on remission. So really, really interesting. I didn't see it, but I guarantee you I'm going to go back and watch it.
there
sounds
was,
really good.
yeah, there was one that I'm looking at right now. It is one of the slides. It was the treatment goals in lupus, and it talked about mild, moderate, and severe with like, it has little asterisks next to it. And it was talking, it gives underneath basically what each one of them means. But mild is symptoms, mild arthritis, rash less than 9%. And it talks about certain medications and manifestations. It's just really interesting. And then underneath that, it goes into the typical medications that are used: grade A, grade B, grade C, and grade D. It's just another, and it talks about what the target is. The target is no steroids at all, which for remission, which
Well,
again,
yeah.
hello.
Well, for lupus in particular,
Yes.
that's a big one because
Right.
that's more often used.
Right.
Okay.
I get that. Yeah. And it's just interesting to see the biologics are more into the higher grades, C and D,
Mhm.
and methotrexates earlier on, glucocorticoids with also the hydrochloroquine. I always say that wrong.
We all have,
HCQ.
we all have those words. We all
Yeah.
have them.
Yeah.
Interesting. Well, it sounds like a great session. We'll definitely
good.
need to go back. So in the interest of time,
Yes.
we were going to go into a big old conversation about fatigue, but we're gonna put that off and let you all come back for that one, because wow, that was a good one. Deb and I were both like, oh, it was just really good. So you have to come back to our next debrief, and we'll talk about the fatigue session, because we were already worried we would be over 15 minutes just in that. It was just a lot. It was all about just a lot about research and what they're doing with fatigue, and what the percentage of patients, and it seems a little low to me. And so, yeah, we're going to have to talk. We got to talk about that one.
We have like
So-
lots of conversation points that we like
So
to hit
come
on that.
back to our next debrief on that. But we're going to kind of close out on just some bullet points of the other things that we saw. And one of them, I went to a session, multidisciplinary patient care, the new era of rheumatology, and wanted to just briefly mention that, because we said a theme is this collaboration. It's also about multidisciplinary care. A lot of talk about that. There's been talk about that for, a decade, but to see it really coming to the forefront and with the collaboration, I have to ask, I don't know if it's driven by COVID and the need to think differently, whatever it is, glad to see it. One of the things that I did just want to ask come from that, there's one I wanted to ask all of you. Let me see, where was it at? Oh, I think this is it. Yeah. So they were talking about the need to have different doctors treat different things. How many do you all have? Like, I have a dermatologist, a gastroenterologist, that kind of thing. Like 5, 4, 10,
7 or 8.
okay. Do
4.
they work 4? Leslie was
4.
4?
So this is just specialists?
Yeah.
1.
Okay. Do they all work together? Do they talk?
No.
No.
I'm seeing a lot of everyone's shaking their head. Deb, you're the only one who didn't shake their head. No. So yours do work together?
Yeah, because again, I live in Wisconsin and it's the UW system. So again, everybody's sharing notes with each other. And before my foot surgery, my rheumatologist was in, they talked, my primary care doctor, they talked with the foot surgeon. Again, they do it as a team approach. So better than it's ever been done before for me.
I'm lucky. Al, got to give him the 2 thumbs up on that one. But most of my doctors are within the Washington University network. So they all kind of know each other, which makes it helpful as well. The last thing I wanted to ask about that, there was a session in this talking again about comorbidities, surprise, surprise. But this one in particular talked about difficult to treat, and they said it was RA, difficult to treat rheumatoid arthritis. And there was a slide And it basically defined difficult to treat rheumatoid arthritis as failing 2 or more treatments that had different mechanisms of action. So that would be like a TNF, inhibitor versus a JAK inhibitor, that kind of thing. But I thought that was kind of low.
What was the percentage?
It wasn't a percentage. It was a definition of difficult to treat. You need to fail 2 or more treatments of different mechanisms of action.
Wow. I mean,
Then aren't we all difficult?
Yeah, I failed that a long time ago.
I guess I'm difficult to treat. So I just wanted to throw that out there. I just thought that was a really interesting definition, and I'm going to revisit it. But that was in there, and they were using it as an example of why you need to have more specialties because of these comorbidities, and comorbidities lead to difficult to treat. And so it all kind of intertwines. Last but not least, we did go to the EULAR recommendations. Some of us did, I did not. But Deb, did you want to mention anything from there? I think you had.
One session in particular is a friend of ours, Orly Nam. We've done lots of things with her, and shout out to Orly.
Shout out.
I was texting with her today. So her focus is synovial tissue. And Tiff, do you want to say what our partnership is with synovial?
Sure. Just very briefly, we have a whole other episode, I think, that you can find on our list called Changing the World with Your Knee. And I met Orly at OMERAC, which is Outcome Measures in Rheumatology. I've been a patient research partner with them for several years. And I was sitting in for them and ended up getting invited on the team for the synovial tissue team. And then she also does this work through EULAR specifically. And then I said, well, Deb actually has had a knee biopsy, which is part of it. So I said, I have somebody to bring on the team, and there you go. So we've actually been working with Orly and the team, doing a little bit of focus group research on biopsies, if you would like to get a biopsy, if you didn't have to get a biopsy. So that's a great episode to check out. And if you wanted to learn more about how to get involved with that, we certainly can provide that information as well. But we've been following all that she's doing. So you said she's got some recommendations that
she's looking for EULAR to consider some minimal reporting requirements for the biopsies and things like that in clinical practice. So in research of rheumatology as well. And just again, she basically patient recruiting, which is kind of what we were involved with. The biopsy procedure, tissue sampling, the methods of reporting. And there's a lot of discrepancies as far as the types of biopsies, because there's ultrasound and other needle aspirations and things like that. So just looking for better guidelines. And she got into quite a bit of details as far as, points to consider. I think there were 14.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, love you, Orly, but we're not reviewing that. We just want to give you a shout out because we saw you in the recommendations. So,
yes, it was awesome.
But and I know they had COVID ones. We're gonna circle back to that on a different debrief, because there was a lot of COVID stuff, and it's better just to group it together. What else?
Besides COVID and Orly's, that was kind of the biggest brunt of it.
Now, Katie, you had mentioned that you saw something there.
I think we were going to mention the Stein Award winner. My first time at EULAR, so I wasn't really aware of what kind of awards that they give out. But apparently they have a winner for a patient essay every year. And this was how digital solutions benefit my life as a person with RMD. And I think Deb knows a little bit more. I only saw like a highlight of the essay, but it seems like a silver lining of COVID as far as being more inclusive, being able to do things virtually. And I think I've heard people here say that even with EULAR, being able to watch things not live is so helpful. And so that kind of inclusion hopefully will stick around for much longer than the actual pandemic.
The one other thing, definitely, as far as what Katie said, but the one thing that I wanted to point out was, again, this is a patient essay. It is not a doctor or nurse or anybody else that are part of that. And this is given out by PARE, and the recipient, so she's from Denmark, and the one other thing as far as that goes is that she wasn't even able to even do a little video because she was in the hospital and flaring that bad. So the person that was kind of accepting on her behalf was just saying she's super thrilled to have been chosen for that. Again, it just shows the real life reality of what our diseases can be, and even preventing her from even accepting and being part of a little snippet. So yeah, I just thought that was super promising to see, again, patients brought into the award-winning part.
And I probably should have said this earlier. I think we've said EULAR PARE before, but that's people with arthritis and rheumatism in Europe. That's what it stands for. That is that third pillar that we were talking about of EULAR, so that it's PARE. And then just there, well, I'll go through it in a little bit in a different debrief because it's not the first time I've seen it here, but macrophage activation syndrome, or MAS, or MAS. Some people may have started seeing this for the first time during COVID. There was a buzz around it because they were seeing that type of reaction in severe COVID cases. So I did see that there was some EULAR and ACR, which I liked. That was a combination for the early management of that. So going to look back into that because there's other sessions that mention it as well. So stay tuned for that as well. And I think
the one other thing I was going to say
I'm wrong.
is one second is the shout out to Jeffrey Sparks for his abstract award. It was, I mean, go ahead and describe what his relationship is, Tiff, but he's one of our friends as well.
Yes, he has been on the show as well. We have a breakout show called Roomy Rounds, and it is having patients, people living with our diseases, and rheumatology professionals come to the table as equals. And together we have heart-to-heart conversations to solve problems that will improve communication and the rheumatology community. My doctor, Dr. Al, he was heading that up with me, and he introduced us to Jeff. And we did one on vaccinations and COVID, and then Vivica Strand, who I know from OMERACT and Shared Decision Making Group, also joined that one. So we can link to that as well. But big holla to Jeff, good guy, and all the work he's doing with the COVID-19 rheumatology group is fantastic. So all right.
He got the Clinical Science Award, one of 6 from this year as well. So
a Global Rheumatology Alliance, sorry, the GRA. So
yeah.
The COVID-19 Global Rheumatology Alliance. So that's where that's from. All right. Well, I think that we wrapped it up. We did go 9 minutes over, but hey, you know, that's not too bad. Also, for those who are listening, to the audio version of this for our show, that you will be able to access the full uncut version. So when I said 109, I mean, it won't be for the audio. But those of you who are watching it on YouTube, you can watch the full version, or they do get a little bit long. So we have our wonderful producers, Ryan and Bill. Ryan's lurking in the back somewhere. I'll probably do a little like peek out when he hears his name. But or he's not listening at all. I don't know.
He just doesn't want to peek out.
He just said, "Oh, I'm done." He fell asleep like 20 minutes ago. There he is. No,
there he is.
So we have Ryan and Bill, who have been doing a great job of going in and editing segments. So, you know, you can watch the full version, or you can go in and say, no, I only want to learn about the lupus. I only want to learn about, you know, this segment. So they're doing a great job of doing that as well. And started with the ones we did last year. But you can watch all of them from last year too on our YouTube channel. And you can find the link to that on our website at AiArthritis.org. You can also listen to any of our talk show episodes at AiArthritis.org/talk show. And we're almost up to 100, which what?
Crazy. I know.
I can't believe it.
How fast that happened.
I know. And so you could go ahead and check those out. And you could also find us on our social media channels at AiArthritis. give us a holla. Let us know what you think, or if you have any questions about what we've talked about today. And if you're interested in going with us and learning more about these opportunities to go with us to conferences, I'm gonna have you email Katie. She's like, what? I didn't. So email Katie, and it's Katie@AiArthritis.org, and go ahead and just KATIE@AiArthritis.org, and just put go to conferences in the subject line so that she knows to get back to you ASAP. And if you're on the site, go ahead and click that big old donate button, because that's how we keep the show alive and all of the other work we do, like going to conferences. You cannot do it without your generous support. But lastly, I cannot wrap up the show without thanking everybody here that has joined today. So Deb and Patrice and Katie and Leslie, thank you so much. And I wanted to give Leslie an opportunity as one of our guests going with us, and a wonderful blogger and patient advocate, to let everyone know where they can find you.
Thank you. So my blog is gettingclosertomyself.blogspot.com. So you can find me there, as well as on social media. But I will be sharing about EULAR on my blog coming up. So
Awesome.
Can you repeat that one more time? Getting closer
to myself.
Okay, thank you.
.blogspot.com.
Wonderful. Thank you. And so there we go. We are wrapping this up. And as always, just remember, as an organization, our goal is to bring all voices to the table. So whether you are a person living with the diseases or another stakeholder, your voice matters, because only together can we solve the problems of tomorrow. So it's your turn. Pull up a seat and join the conversation. And thank you all for joining us today. That's a wrap.
Gotta push stop.
Stop.
Yep.